Why do we do the things we do? It's a really good question, right? Why do we do the things we do? Sometimes there are moments in our lives where we are particularly clear, and we know for a fact that we do something because we know we're going to get ice cream after. Maybe there are moments where we look at ourselves or we look at somebody else and we ask, why do they do the things that they do? Why do we do the things that we do? And we aren't perhaps very sure about our motives. Matthew 25 suggests the why. Perhaps, for some of us, we follow Jesus for us. It's understandable if you desire a greater life, if you want to avoid something painful. Maybe you follow Jesus for them. Maybe we strive for a better world because there's someone that we love and care about, and we don't want them to have to experience the same things we experienced. Matthew 25, I truly do think, tries to simplify things for us. No matter why we may do the things we do, no matter why we may find ourselves in this moment curious about motivation. I think Richard Rohr, in his book, Breathing Underwater, Jesus in Matthew 25, as he tells this apocalyptic story, tries to set us straight, tries to make things simple. You know, even John Wesley, the founder of Methodism, had 3 simple rules. And the Methodists among us, the most Methodists, especially the preachers, know those 3 simple rules. What are they? I will tell you what they are. Do no harm. Do good. Stay in love with God. And John Wesley believed that as Methodists, we could do these 3 simple things. They're not easy. They're simple. Do no harm, do good, and stay in love with God. And that would take care of everything. In some way, I believe Matthew 25 strives to give us that kind of simplicity. Do no harm, do good, stay in love with God. Now, to be fair, Matthew 25 leaves off John Wesley's 3rd point, staying in love with God. If you read this story, interestingly enough, Matthew 25 is not about recognizing the King. We often make our faith and our journey with Jesus about recognizing Jesus, right? And we say, there Jesus is. There's the Holy Spirit moving. Here's all these things in our lives where we can see Christ. But in Matthew 25, the why is not dependent upon recognizing the King. Both the righteous and the unrighteous ask the question, where were you among the hungry, among the sick, among the naked, among the imprisoned? Matthew 25 is an apocalyptic drama. It's not just a parable. Parables happen in stories where we're supposed to insert ourselves. Like Jesus saying, hey, once there was someone who merged into oncoming traffic. That's a parable. This, that's a little harder. Judgment will happen. And perhaps for some of us, we feel like judgment has happened, but it's really a question of otherworldly meaning found in very worldly deeds and actions. Jesus is the Son of Man, the Messianic shepherd who cares for the sheep and came to make the final separation between sheep and goats. My friends, I don't believe it is my job as the pastor. It is not our job to put ourselves in the place of the good shepherd and determine who the sheep and the goats are. But let's read this story and see what matters to the good shepherd. To the reader's surprise, the criterion for judgment is not a confession of faith. Nothing in this story interestingly, has anything to do with grace, justification, or forgiveness of sins. What counts in Matthew 25 is whether one has acted with loving care for needy people. In fact, this passage doesn't ask why so much as who. The passage says why. The passage says that when we care for the needy, we are caring for the king. We're caring for the ones that the king cares about. There's our why. Why do we care for people in need? Why do we act? Why do we feed? Why do we visit people who have no freedoms, like those who are sick or those who are in prison? Because when we do those things, we are loving Jesus. This passage does ask who. It asks who. Matthew 25 answers some very real questions around who. A lot of the theological discourse in this passage doesn't even deal with sheep and goats. That's clear. Sheep are those who do. Goats are those who do not. But it does deal with who are all the nations. Who are the least of these? Someone once upon a time in the Bible asked Jesus that same question, don't they? Jesus, who is my neighbor? To which Jesus, after telling the story of the Good Samaritan, goes on to say, who's the neighbor? And the man is forced to answer, the one who shows mercy. Matthew 25 should imply to us that this is about individuals. The Greek actually does. This is not about nation states. This is about people being people. The least of these, who are they? Surely, Matthew's gospel shows a Christ that cares about the world, a universal and primary meaning of meeting needs. It could also, perhaps, mean taking care of Christians, other brothers and sisters. But I think one thing that is clear is that the story is not about looking out there and trying to decide if someone else is a sheep or a goat. Instead, this is a story about us, isn't it? It's not a story about the Gentiles being condemned because they failed to minister to other Christians. It's really about Christians neglecting their Lord by neglecting their neighbors. Richard Rohr has a thing or two to say about how we live out Matthew 25. As a matter of fact, in the book, Breathing Underwater, he's going through the 12 steps of AA, the 12 steps that help people stop drinking, the 12 steps that help people deal with their addictions. And we come today to steps 9 and 10, which I believe help us continue the good work that we have built on over the past several weeks. I think they help us live out Matthew 25 and be real in our faith. So, step 9. Made direct amends to such people wherever possible, except when to do so would be to injure them or others. We talked a bit about this last week. We talked about what it means to be honest with ourselves and with God about perhaps where we have wronged other people. Step 9 is about doing something about it. I grew up with brothers. 3 of them. I like to point out that we all have J names: Jack, Jerry, Jimmy, Jonathan. And as we grew up together, sometimes, let's just say that you may not have been very loving to one another. Any of you have siblings? I can remember with stark clarity when my brothers wronged me. When Jonathan messed up my Nintendo. When Jerry excluded me from getting to be with him and his friends for a sleepover. When Jimmy was too cool to talk to me at that football game. I know when people have wronged me. But what's interesting about having brothers is you have lots of other opportunities to wrong them. I tell you this because we've talked about it. This is not a confessional moment. Jonathan and I are straight. We're cool. We're all right. But you know, Jonathan was 7 years younger than me. 7 years. Do you know what that means? It means he's lucky to be alive. Because there were times where I was not kind to my brother. Now let me ask you this. Jonathan's world, would it have been better if I had simply known that? Or is his world better because I can know that and make amends? Yes, there is wisdom, there is power in apologies, in healthy apologies, good apologies. Sometimes we don't have good apologies. Sometimes we do not come at this in the right way. And that is why this accept when to do so would injure them or others can be so important, because sometimes we need to be wise about how we make amends. But we should do it. The wisest among us, they know that there is a clear path to doing things well. They know they don't have to keep doing trial and error. Isn't that why the people who love us and are wise say, don't do what I did, do it this way? For some reason, we as Christians believe that our entire faith is supposed to be some kind of game of trial and error. It doesn't have to be. Someone in your life has the wisdom and knows how to take step 9 seriously. Richard Rohr points out that even though Jesus was the Son of God, he spends most of his time in the Synoptic Gospels calling himself the Son of Man. Even in our passage in Matthew 25, the Son of Man is one who makes amends, who feeds the hungry, who clothes the naked, who takes care of those who are imprisoned. He doesn't say, worship me. He says, follow me. Step 9 encourages us to skillfully protect our own humanity and to liberate the humanity of others. It's also, I think, pretty direct, isn't it? Hunger, thirst, nakedness. You take care of these things not through a tweet or an email, but as real and as physically as possible. And Matthew 25, despite being a vision of the future, it is very much grounded in the physical actions of the present. I think the addendum to step 9 is important. We need wisdom, and we do well to draw close to Jesus in this endeavor. Another way that we can stay on the right side of Matthew 25 is when we see a need and we act. We find this in step 10. Continued to take personal inventory, and when we were wrong, promptly admitted it. My friends, sometimes we are the ones who create a need. In step 10, after doing step 9, after making amends as best we can with our brothers and our sisters, as making amends in so many places where we have created a need, step 10 then keeps us close to the heart of Christ, because we stay mindful, conscious of where we may have messed up during our day. Sometimes we are the one who create a need. Richard Rohr points out in step 10 that this is not a moral inventory. It's not the same thing we did earlier. This is a personal inventory, one where we look at ourselves objectively, calmly, compassionately. How often do we get to look at ourselves objectively and not judge? Just look. Have y'all ever noticed that people who know who they are do this easiest? Whenever we do anything stupid, cruel, evil, destructive, it's often because we have become unconscious to who we are. We've forgotten who we are. We've forgotten who Jesus is and who he says we are. You find someone who loves people well, and you will find a highly conscious, reflective person. Being fully conscious, I think, really does mean, and Richard Rohr says this, loving everyone in some way and in some level, even our mistakes. Y'all remember Jesus has something to say about our love, doesn't he? He says, love your enemies. Do we have the enemies in our lives like our sins? Do we have enemies in our lives like our imperfections? Maybe Jack needs to come to terms with how I act. Maybe I can be fully conscious and fully liberated. Maybe, just maybe, after following through with these steps all the way to 10, the why will take care of itself. And I can just act. Why am I a good person? Why should you be a good person? Why should we be the church in a world that feels like the tide is rising and things are going to happen and it's not looking good, guys? Should we do it for us? Should we do it for them? Should we do it for God? We all win when we take care of each other. The answer is yes. The answer is yes. Do it for yourself. The answer is yes. Do it for them. The answer is yes. Do it for Jesus. If somebody eats tonight because you feed them, praise be to God. It's incredible to me that Christians get sidetracked with anything else. It's almost cliche to say that we should take care of each other. But I have to. What I hope you'll hear me say is that when we take care of other people, even when it costs us something, we win. When we take care of other people, even if they don't appreciate it, even if they never know our names, even if they don't respond in ways that we want them to, we win. And when we take care of other people, no matter our doubts or faith or understanding, we win. And that we is a really big tent. Our faith does matter. Jesus is working to mend the entire universe, starting with your heart. You today are invited to recognize that Jesus has acted in our lives, acted in our world, and we get to be a part of acting with him. We're going to share in Holy Communion.